Okay, we're up to Siman Chav Zayin, Sif Yud Aleph, Halacha Yud Aleph. Says the Mechaber. Tzarich sheyeh hashachar sheberetzuos letzad chutz v'lo yishapchu. The Retzuos, the black of the Retzuos, should be facing out. V'lo yishapchu, and they shouldn't turn around. They shouldn't sort of flip round, so that the leather parts, the non-black parts, shouldn't be facing outwards. Bein shel yad, bein shel rosh. That applies to both the Retzuos of the shel yad and the shel rosh. Let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah on this, on the first line. Says the Mishnah Berurah in Sifkat Lamed Ches, v'lo yishapchu, and the Retzuos should be black. The black part should be facing out. V'im nishapchu, and if they do flip round, midas chasidus hu lehisanus. The midas chasidus, the pious way of acting, is to fast. I liftos b'tzedakah, to pay some sort of money to tzedakah as a tikkun for it. Now we're not talking about whether Retzuos down the front just flip round for a moment. That happens, and one should try and avoid it. But that's quite often quite easy to happen. But rather, we're talking about very specific parts of the Retzuos. On the tefillin shel rosh, it's the bit which goes on the head itself. So the Retzuos which are going around the head, connecting from the front, the tefillin, to the kesher at the back, that part shouldn't flip round. So the mashal, at the end of davening, you're taking off your tefillin, and then you suddenly notice that the Retzuos have been the wrong way round. So then that's what this is talking about. Ves hakiberes pam echos, avol mashe kairich achekach, mashe mishtal of Retzuos shel tefillin shel rosh, ein tzorach lahakbid klal shelo yishapech. But the bit at the front of the tefillin, of course, we should try and make sure that the black is facing out. But if that flips round, it's not the end of the world. Mitzvah is not the essential part of the mitzvah. Mitzvah, for the beautification of the mitzvah, that one should try, like I said, that the black part should be facing out on all parts of the Retzuos for the noyim, the mitzvah. Not only the shel rosh, bein shel yad. Says the Mishnah Berurah in Sifkat Lamed Tes, hu b'shel yad shehu roya kasher meniach. He's got to be careful when he puts the tefillin on. Yochel liros shelo yishapech la'akeshev le'aretzua. Or v'shel rosh de'ena roya kasher meniach soviv reishay. When you can't see it, yemashmesh heitev b'yodu mokem ha'ktzitza b'chol tzad. So with the shel rosh, it's harder to see. With the shel yad, you can see. And again, we're talking about only that part of the Retzuah, which is right, where you're tying it around the place of the tefillin. But the Retzuos further down, which you put on your arm, again, that is the same as the Retzuos on the front. They should ideally be the right way around, but that's less of a concern. We're talking about the Retzuos, which are by the head or around the tefillin shel yad when you're actually tying it. And therefore, says the Mishnah Berurah, you should be careful when you're placing them with the tefillin shel yad. It's easier to see, but the tefillin shel rosh, you should feel it with your hands to make sure that the Retzuos are not twisted in any way. Okay, continuing the Mechaber. Yeshal shel haretzuos, you should sort of hang down the Retzuos, sheyutluyim lefonov, that they should be facing forward, v'yagiu ad hatabur, and they should reach down until the navel, until the belly button, or a little bit higher than that. Says the Mishnah Berurah on that point. How far down do the Retzuos have to go? Mishnah Berurah Sifkat ad mem ad hatabur v'im hoisif al zeh les lonbo. If they go beyond that point, lower than the navel, the belly button, that's not a problem. Or even a little bit higher than that, that's okay. Says the Mishnah Berurah in Mem Aleph. Take a look at the Chidush of Rabbi Akiva Eiga. V'chein b'Artzos Chaim, and also the Artzos Chaim, the Malbim, the maski shel yamin, the right hand, the right Retzuah going down, should be at ha-tibur, until the navel. V'shel small at ha-chozer, the left one goes higher up, and that's until the chest. So it only goes up to this sort of point. Of a Torah kosav oid, and the Torah writes further, v'yesh omrim d'shel yamin at ha-mila. The right one should go down to the mokum of the mila. V'shel small at ha-tibur, and the left one should go down until the navel, until the belly button. So that's the practice, to do it much longer, that the right one extends further than the left one, and the right one should go down to the mokum of the mila, and the left one at ha-tibur, like I said, until the navel. Okay, continuing the Shulchan Aruch. Roich of ha-Retzuos, the width of the Retzuos, shel yad v'shel rosh, both the shel yad and the shel rosh, ka'orech sa'ira lepachos, should be the length of a grain of barley. Now, in footnote 49, he says that is, he says, according to the Chazon Ish, that is 10.7 centimeters, and you shouldn't really go less than 11 centimeters. So to give an idea that the Retzuos should not be less than a width of about 11 centimeters. In Piches Mishir, Orach HaRetzuos V'Rachban, if it goes less than that, Orach HaRetzuos V'Rachban, Im Eina Moitzi Acheres, if you can't find any other Retzuos, then Manichen Kumushehen, you could still put them on despite them being a bit short, a bit too narrow, until you find replacements which have got the right size. Let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah till there. Ka'orach Sa'ora, Mishnah Berurah Sivkot and Membeis, Ka'orach Sa'ora, Hainu B'kliposo. That is with the barley grain with its shell. So like I said, according to Chazon Ish, not less than about 11 centimeters. But not the little bit that sort of protrudes from it. With the little strands that come out of the kernel, the barley grain, which go much longer. We're talking about the actual grain itself. There are those who say that it's enough to have the width, not the length of the grain, but the width of the grain, which is a measure which is a bit smaller than that. And in extenuating circumstances, one could rely on that. One has to be very careful in the place where you're tying on the shelyad, when you're pulling it, when you're tying it to you're securing it. It's very likely that the Retzuos is being pulled, and it could sort of narrow and shrink a little bit. Or it could even snap. So you've got to be very careful that the width of the Retzuos, in all parts of the Retzuos, and especially around the shelyad, when you're securing the bias over there, that part of the Retzuah doesn't get pulled and sort of squashed, that it gets too thin and too narrow, less than the shear, or perhaps even snaps. Mem Gimel Meinichin, this is going on the Mechaba, which says, you put them on as they are. Says the Mishnah Berurah in Sivkot and Mem Gimel, there are those who say it's kosher, and those who are pasel even b'di'eved, and therefore if there are no other options, no other alternatives, then you can put them on despite them being a bit narrow. Says the Mishnah Berurah, maskid in piches mishir ha'irech b'shelyad. If the shelyad one gets too narrow, haniskelel b'sivches, like we mentioned previously in sivches, yaniach bli bracha. Then you should put them on without a bracha. V'myesh kadei lifshet ad etzba tzreida. If there's enough that you could sort of stretch them out ad etzba tzreida, hakrichas ein ma'akvin. The krichas, the wrappings are not going to be ma'akavit. If the retzuos are too thin, lower down the retzuos when you're wrapping it around your arm. The dafka. With regard to the length of the Retzuos of the Sharosh, it says in the Artzos Chaim, the dafkem yesh chutz b'mashimakev harish al kol ponim kashnir shnei tefachim. There should be round the head at least a shear of 2 tefachim. Halav hochi yanichim b'lei bracha, but less than that, you should put them on without a bracha. Well, the Indian reichav haretzuos shel yad v'sharosh hichmi gam kenim. Regarding the Retzuos that you put around the shelyad and the sharosh, we're also machmidim lo he'rak kadei orach hachita yanichim b'li bracha. If you haven't got they're too narrow, they haven't got the length of this kernel, of this barley kernel, this grain, again you put them on without a bracha. Ayin sham. Well, the Indian imahani lesaken b'retzuos, and regarding whether you can repair them, whether you can fix them, ayin lekama b'soif siman lamed gil Mishnah Berurah sham. Okay, back to the Mechaba. Says the Mechaba. Here we are. 3 lines from the bottom. Tefillin sharosh. The tefillin sharosh tov liyosem guluyim v'nirim. They should be exposed. In other words, there should be nothing covering the tefillin sharosh. They should be exposed. Avol talmid b'fnei Rabbi ein derech eretz legalis tefillin b'fonov. It's not derech eretz to have your tefillin exposed in front of your Rebbe. Says the Ramah Hagah uv'shelyad ein lahakbid. With regard to the tefillin shelyad, we're not particular. Imhem guluyim emechusim, whether they're covered or exposed. V'nirali, and says the Ramah, it appears to me, da'achshav she'ein manichin ela bizman kriya shema tefillah. Since we only put on tefillin nowadays during davening, i.e. during Krishma and Shemon Esra, afilu talmid lifnei Rabbi yochel legalis af b'sharosh. Even a talmid in front of his Rebbe, he's allowed to expose the sharosh, v'chein haminhag shelo lizoheh. And that indeed is the minhag, that we're not particular about that. Says the Mishnah Berurah in Memhei, tov lihiyosom dichsiv. What is the reason? Why should your tefillin sharosh be exposed and open, visible for everyone to see. Tichsiv, because the pasuk says, "V'ro kol amei haaretz," that all the amei haaretz should see the tefillin and should see the majesty and the beauty of the tefillin. V'toiv shegam hakeshi megula, and the kesher should also be exposed. But we are not knowing like this. But the eved af im hayu mechusin legamra yotze, even if it was totally covered, then you're yotze. Ein derech eretz. We said that it's not derech eretz to have your tefillin exposed in front of your Rebbe. Why? Sha tefillin hem derech kavod, because tefillin should be worn derech kavod. K'dichsiv v'ro kol amei haaretz ve'ein derech eretz lahashves atzma l'Rabbi. And it's not you're equating yourself with your Rebbe, al ken yechasos on betalisa b'kovin. Therefore, you should cover it over with your hat. In other words, v'ro kol amei haaretz, all the people, everyone, no distinction, should see them. But your Rebbe should be on a different level. He should be on a higher level, and you shouldn't just sort of group him together with everyone else, and therefore ro kol amei haaretz, everyone else should see them, but in front of your Rebbe you should cover them. That's the idea. However, as the Ramah says, ein lahakbid, says the Mishnah Berurah, it's better if you can to cover them. Imhem gluyim pirush she'im nikru begadov leslon ba. In other words, if your jacket or whatever is ripped, don't worry about it. But you certainly can't put it over the beged. That's a problem of chatzitza, like we've said previously. Okay, Beseda, we'll leave it there.